Okay, we should be good.
You're good. All right. How are things out where you are? How's your day been?
They're good. The water went out in our office today, which was great. So,
Awesome.
yeah, it was good, and there was no air conditioning. We were
Where?
definitely roughing it.
So you have a day job?
I do, yes.
You do. Okay. What do you do for during the day?
Um, during the day, I am an IT slash web developer.
Oh, cool.
Uh, I work in an IT company, but I'm their web developer slash web designer, and so I manage a lot of different accounts, and I manage a lot of different clients. Basically either creating websites for them or doing various other tasks. So yeah, that's my day job. So,
Is there a particular type of client or just any that come to the company?
um, pretty much any that come to the company. I don't really specialize in any particular field,
Okay.
so it's just kind of open. So I
And
mean, I've done everything from working on an RV park website to we just launched a children's dental website. So so it's kind of across the
all
board.
right. All right. Why not?
Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
What's the strangest one you've done?
hmm. Trying to
Or
think.
is there? Or are they pretty kind of on a level?
Most of them are okay.
Okay.
I think I've had a few people ask me to help them out with websites, not necessarily work related, but it's been a little unusual. There have been, and I think just mostly because some of the websites that people have asked me to help with have been very old, and so it'll
Okay.
look like just not necessarily not at work, but otherwise they'll say, hey, can you take a look at this website? Let me know what you think, and it's like an Angel Fire website, and I'm like, I really recommend that you upgrade everything.
It was one of the first ones up, 2002. I remember.
Yeah, it was voted best web bringing website in 2001.
All right. I
So
have
yep.
memories. All right. Well, let's go even further back than today then.
Okay.
Where are you from?
I was born in Tulsa,
Okay.
Oklahoma. Moved around a lot growing up. I've lived in Colorado, Virginia, Alabama, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But I spent most of my youth in Louisiana. So I lived in a town called Lafayette, which is between New Orleans and Lake Charles. It's kind of like down in the center, and
Yeah.
um, heart of Cajun country. So it was a very unique experience growing up.
In what way?
Um, uh, the Cajun culture is really unique. It's really how do I put this? Uh, it it's kind of its own self-contained subculture
Okay.
within the United States. The Cajuns came down from the Cajuns come from the Acadians, which were banished from Nova Scotia. So they're all originally French, and they all came down to Lafayette and decided to, or down in the area of Lafayette, and decided to settle there, and became somewhat of they became these survival experts, and very hearty, jovial, happy people, and a lot of Cajun music, Cajun food,
Okay.
Zydeco, Creole, you name it. It's incredibly unique in everything, I guess.
Do you
So
have that background in your heritage, or you
I
just
do not.
okay?
I'm
You
a
just happen to
complete
be.
foreigner. Yeah, I'm a complete foreigner.
Uh,
I'm an Okie, and so I thought I was until I moved back here, and then I don't even know what I am now. And
uh,
I think I've been spoiled by Louisiana because I'm always waiting because in Louisiana things shut down for Mardi Gras, and so every year I have this somewhat. I've been back in Oklahoma for about 5 years, and I still expect Mardi Gras season to come around. It's just
yeah.
because I lived in Lafayette for 14 years, and so it's still this kind of like in the back of my head. I'm always assuming that there's going to be some kind of major parade or something to shut down the city.
It's like
So
that first year where you don't get summer break from school,
yeah, exactly,
and you're just like,
exactly,
wait a second, something's missing.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
gotta work all year round.
I know. Oh yeah, definitely. And it's funny because Mardi Gras season starts right after Christmas, so it's kind of like down there. It's like once you hit Halloween, and once you start moving into Thanksgiving, it's just holiday after holiday after
Mm,
holiday until about March. And so it's like this entire like season of festivities where it's much shorter for everywhere everyone else, in the United States we have Thanksgiving and then Christmas, and that's pretty much it. But for them, it's just like party, 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 party all the way through.
Right.
And April is when everyone has to start kind of paying attention and getting back to work.
Like wake up a little bit.
Yeah.
So, pay taxes, get back to work.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what then? I assume then as a kid you probably experienced a lot of colorful culture and art while there.
A lot of interesting things. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. I actually on the podcast that I'm gonna have you on. I've been talking to a good friend that I met in college. She's Cajun, and she's from the area, and we were discussing kind of this unusual nature of the culture down there in that religion and mythology and I guess what we would consider old wives' tales or superstition, they're all the same. And so it's a very unusual thing. It affects art, it affects music, it affects everything. And so it's very much I don't really have a word for it. It's just an unusual mix of things. But yeah, the arts are really praised down there. There's another major festival that they call Festival International, and I grew up with that. And people come up from all over the world, and they shut down downtown and do all of that, and just boosts of handmade work. And so yeah, I was really spoiled down there. There really isn't anything like that up here, and so I'm kind of missing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think every city is going to have its own thing, but like I go back to Iowa. I live in San Diego. I go back to Iowa as much as possible in August for the Iowa State Fair. I can go to any state fair, like any state or county fair.
Right.
But there's no Iowa State Fair. There's something about it that it's unique to that thing.
Yeah. And I think we form attachments to something that really impacted us when we were younger, and it's just like it's kind of like funnel cake will never taste as good as it tastes in your hometown, your state fair, with that like specific set of smells and sights and sounds. It's just like nothing can compare to that.
Right. And certain memories.
Yeah, exactly. I think we all just get sold on those types of things, and that's nostalgia is a very powerful thing.
Yes, so. It is. It is. So when did you really start getting into art then? Were you a kid at the time, or were you a late bloomer with that?
I started drawing when I was a kid, mostly at the encouragement of my mom. Okay. She was an artist herself, and so she really encouraged me to just really draw a lot.
Was she a professional artist or just a hobbyist, or?
She was a hobbyist,
okay,
but
cool.
she'd won a few awards and with her art, but decided to become kind of a stay-at-home mom. So she, sacrificed for myself and my sister.
As were the times.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I kind of grew up and kind of did my own thing. I had this kind of this universe that I created when I was about 12 to 14. And then I kind of just put it away, and when I became kind of a mid-teens, I put it away and was like, I've got other stuff to do, and so I went around. I just was a teenager, and I didn't really get back to it, seriously get back into it until I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
I was in college and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and I started out college with a history major because I didn't know I didn't want to be undeclared, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I was just kind of going from major to major trying to figure out.
I did it too, so I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, do I want to do this? Because once you get in there, you realize I don't want to do this for the rest of my life.
Exactly, but I think that's kind of the joy in a way of going there to college. I was an archaeology major. Come on, and after a semester, I was like, no, I don't want to memorize all of that terminology, So I was like, what's a different one I want to do? I'll just read National Geographic. What else can I do? So I think that a lot of people go through that. So.
Yeah. Okay. I just switched the audio on my mic. Do I sound better, worse, different at all?
It sounds sort of the same. No, it sounds, yeah.
Sounds good? Sounds the same?
Yep.
I just realized halfway through it defaulted to. It was showing me that it was on default, and I was like, I don't know what that means, so I wanted to
Oh.
make sure.
Do you have a webcam separate from your camera or from your computer?
Yes.
Okay, so usually it defaults to that microphone.
Okay.
I use this little. I plug a USB mic in just to
Awesome.
make it sound like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, that sounds great. I totally.
So before you took your break, was there a specific location? Because you said you moved around a lot. Was there a specific location that you found was more inspirational to you artistically?
I think. Well, you know, a lot of the basis of my stories when I was younger took place in Louisiana because, you know, it was just kind of starting out. I can't really get into. I'm actually writing a book based on that story, and so I can't be too specific. But it starts out in Louisiana because you know I would daydream all the time, and so I decided to just start writing it down, and I started writing down these little stories, and I was the weird kid in school who would write this giant fantasy story in the little penmanship book that we were supposed to have, which was like, you know, Sally threw the ball, and I was like, I would be the kid who would say Sally threw the ball and it became a giant spaceship, and then it took off to another galaxy. You know, I was the weird one.
You take it further.
Yeah, I would always take it further, and so I just ended up kind of compiling it after a while, and kind of decided to put it all together in this little, you know, universe. But it was kind of like all of the characters were heavily influenced by, I think, the Cajun area, like the area of Louisiana that I was in. Yeah. They weren't Cajun themselves, but they was just definitely, I was heavy into, you know, Star Trek, Star Wars, all of the major franchises.
Right.
And so, but some of the characters actually came from my friends. I would base some of the characters off of my friends, whether or not they knew it. And to this day, some of them don't know it, and that's fine with me. But
let's keep it that way. Let's keep it that way.
They will never know. Very few of them keep up with what I do anyway. So I have a few high school friends, but that's it. That I keep up with. But you know,
those are the good characters.
Yeah, exactly. They're the ones who survived.
Right.
You know, I would sometimes I started getting into this mode of looking at someone and saying, that would make a good character. That would make a really interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of sit there and be really weird and analyze them and go, okay, those are their strengths. Those are their strengths. So you know, they're kind of like this, and they're kind of like, you know, they have some positive and negative, and that would be really interesting if I just like put them in space. And it was a good way for me to kind of cut my teeth in fantasy and in storytelling.
So where did let's actually talk a little bit about the storytelling, because do you have a preference over being the storyteller or the artist, or is there one that comes easier to you?
Storytelling comes easier. World building, is very easy for me. I just have been doing it so long. That, you know, if you hand me a piece of paper and say create a planet, I just default to, you know, certain things and can say, you know, it's a desert planet, but there's a river that runs right in the middle of it, all around the planet, and you know, just something like that.
Sure.
Art just takes a lot of time. I get much more frustrated with the art aspect.
Yeah.
I would prefer to run like a project, you know, where other people are doing the art. You know, 100% of the time, but I still love it. I still love the kind of learning process, and sometimes story comes from mistakes that I make during the art process. You know, I make some kind of doodle, and I'm like, hey, I like that character. I think that guy's going to be a good fit for the story. And a lot of that's, you know, some of the best characters I've had have been mistakes. So.
I mean, I think a lot of things just in general in life come from happy mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, a lot of that's how a lot of my stories as well. That's the genesis of them as well. Is I see something, you know, I'm like, well, that's weird. I better write that down, and then there's a story, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And well, you know, it was funny. One of my characters, one of the stories, Right now, I have Space Barista, and there's this little fuzzy character that I draw for my patrons and for just general. I just share it in general. It's a little fuzzy character named Lupa, and he's a little fuzzy guy with a lion's tail and 2 arms and 2 legs. And that design actually was birthed in an art class. I got my stuff done early, and which was rare. We were sitting in class. I was really bored, and I was just started doodling. And so I was talking with 2 friends, and I just made this little character, this like little weird anime-like character, and with 2 little bobble antennae. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so it just kind of started this process of tinkering with that character design, and it just kind of moved into something like I actually ended up splitting the character into 2 designs. The first design that I had actually became the designs for a comic that I had in the newspaper, the college newspaper.
Cool.
So I created a comic with that character design, but I kept another design private, and so I kept working on that over the years, and so I made it, different enough to be able to have its own kind of story. But it all came from a doodle.
Yeah. Well, about how far in though to the? Have you ever made changes while you've gone a certain length into the story?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And about
sometimes
how far?
to my detriment.
Yeah.
I actually try to keep as open as possible with the story.
Okay.
Unless I know that this is a good, strong story, I usually try to keep bits and pieces of it open just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not necessarily the kind of person to sit down and have all of the, dot all of the I's and cross all of the T's. Because I want to make room for the happy accidents that happen. Like if I'm telling a story and decide to change it a little bit, and it kind of goes into a different direction, sometimes the direction's great. So I try to leave myself room to grow, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I build the structure, and as I build the rest of the story, I try to keep enough windows and doors open,
right.
Just in case I ever want to change it in the future.
You have to be flexible.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anybody. Well, I'm going to take that back. Let me rephrase that. I think it would be very difficult to have the entire story all right there in your head right away. Like some things are going to change during the storytelling process. And to me, if I were collaborating with others, for example, an artist, because I can't draw, or maybe let me say I choose not to draw. If I were collaborating with others, that would be difficult. I would feel like a little more pressure. Do you ever encounter that? Do you collaborate with others, or do you feel it's much easier doing just stuff by yourself?
Yeah, I have to be much more on point when I'm collaborating with others because I kind of owe it to them.
Right.
Because if I let myself, I can become very flighty in the design because my design process is really all over the board, and that's okay when it's just me. I have kind of working on different, spinning a bunch of different plates at once, and but when I'm collaborating, I have to be so much more focused and linear in the way that I communicate, because I have to communicate those ideas to someone else.
Right. Can you go through that process that you take?
Sure. And individually or with someone else?
Yes. Let's start individually.
Individually. Let's see. I could probably let's talk about. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a project. Let's talk about Space Barista, since it's something that I'm doing right now. It's an ongoing thing.
Well, could you give a brief synopsis of Space Barista so people have an idea of what it is?
Sure. Space Barista is a weekly comic about this regular Joe who sells coffee in space. He works in a space mall and has a bunch of really weird people around him, and he's just trying to make a living. And it's like a slice of life type of comic, and he just kind of lives. Doesn't really. He sometimes goes on adventures, but mostly he just sells coffee. So,
he's a space barista. He's got a job to do.
Exactly. So the process that I went through with Space Barista was probably the most refined out of every project that I've had so far. So far, personally, it was much more clean than the other projects. because I'm learning every time I do a new project. I'm
Yeah,
learning to kind of get better at things.
right. I was about to ask about that if that's from experience or just something you learned, picked up quickly, or
Uh, some things I picked up quickly. Some things I had to have beaten into me. It's just
right,
like
right,
sometimes you just don't get it until it happens like 10 times, and you're realizing, okay, I should probably fix this.
right, right.
With Space Barista, the original thought I had was I was getting really frustrated. I had a few comic projects web comic projects that weren't really doing well, and I was just frustrated. But I wanted to make something. I wanted to create something. So I was sitting on my couch and I realized because I'd had what I considered to be two failed projects, which they weren't really failures. I just moved on from them because they weren't getting a lot of views or anything like that. So I finally realized, you know what? I really need to just do something that I need to tell a story that I want to tell, not that I think somebody else needs to hear necessarily, but that I want to tell, in the way that I want to tell it. And so I just sat there and I was like, okay, what would be what would be an interesting story? And it's I play several MMOs. Mostly I play Star Wars: The Old Republic just on my off time as casually. It doesn't require a lot of in-depth grinding or anything like that. You can just kind of go around and do stuff. And just kind of fly around the galaxy if you want. And the only thing that I had played through, the only character that I'd really played through was a smuggler character, and so you're always around a market. You're always around people trying to sell you things. You're always, the galaxy is really huge, and as I was playing the game, I kept seeing these vendors just kind of sitting there, and as I was going through the story, I would just sit there and think, well, what do they do with their lives? What is their daily life like? As an NPC, do they get up in the morning? They just sit there, and they people just are just standing around all day. Like I just started thinking about what the culture was like in some of these arenas, and it just more and more as I played the game and went to other planets and stuff, because I was like, it's kind of sad. These people are here all the time. They have nowhere to go. They're like, you want to buy some glitter spice or something, It's just like that's all they know. Right. And so I thought, one story that I hadn't heard or seen was the story of the average Joe in these magnificent universes. What is a day like in the life of Guinan in Star Trek: The Next Generation? She's a bartender, but we see the scenes where she talks to the main characters, but what about all the times that she doesn't? What about the time she has to clean spills and clean up crap because somebody drop their food all over the floor, or just a daily grind of living in a fantasy universe, and that's kind of where Space Barista came from. I was like, man, I'd love to tell a story of just this dude who maybe has a little bit of he can control coffee, but not the grounds or water, just coffee, right, which is relatively useless in terms of superpowers, and he really doesn't have anything to necessarily set him apart or make him super heroic. But he just lives there. He's the guy who sits there and watches the heroes go on their quests.
Do you think that adds to a character's longevity?
I think so, because I'm not basing his character or his story arc on any specific quest.
Right.
Which I've done in other stories, and the problem is I end up liking the character at the end of the story, but I'm like, well, he only existed to do this, and what do I do now? Now
that that's done.
Yeah, exactly. Now that Mr. Jones has gotten the Return of the Crystal Skull to the crazy aliens and that weird UFO, what's he gonna do now? It's just kind of like. So I kind of intentionally made him kind of an anti-adventure hero, if that makes sense. Nothing in his life is based around adventure. And we had one adventure. I did have one adventure over Christmas break, but he wasn't really a participant. He was just kind of like tagging along.
Right.
And I did that on purpose. And I know some people were upset, and they were like, "Why isn't he doing more?" And I'm like, "Well, that's not what he is. He's not the hero. He's kind of like the dude who's just there."
And that kind of actually is also representative of, I think, people in general. You know, I mean, you look at these sports star athletes or actors and actresses, or even in the art industry, we look at people that were just like, I'll never attain that level. I'll never have those adventures. So
Hmm.
you've created a comic about that person that has its own life.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember I worked in retail for a few years when I was in college.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I know. I think it was really educational, as unusual as it was. It was a small little bookstore, and people I met so many unusual people, unusual and unique, and sometimes insanely scary people. Um, that I just actually I'm really going back to that. I'm going back to those experiences and trying to pull some of the more wacky experiences that I had and kind of place them into Space Barista because it's like we are all we are all the unsung heroes who have worked in retail over any length of time, or any job, food service kind of job that does not require a degree.
I wonder if maybe right out of high school, everyone should be required to work 1 year of customer service.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like
It's kind of
kind of
like, yeah.
like the Israeli army. Like
Yeah.
you are constricted.
Yeah, it's like you have to do this. I think, and I talk actually, I hope one day when I have kids, I want to encourage them to go into retail for just a little bit. I don't
Yeah,
want to
not long.
torture them,
Not long.
but they need to know, because I now have so much compassion for people in retail. Whenever anything happens,
Hmm.
and that
You tip well. You say
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to them, let them know that they're human and that we appreciate what they do, and all that stuff. And so, um, I always try to make sure that they know that that they are appreciated, somehow. Because I remember just I think we've all had those days where it's just been, you know, bad customer after bad customer, and you just want to kill someone, but you can't. Because you got to have a smile on your face and say hello, how are you doing, and that's like the last thing you want to say to someone. And
Welcome to my day job.
yeah, and it's that kind of forced. It's the idea of like a forced professionalism with bad
Hmm.
customers.
Right. Right.
We all have when we all
Cus-
do it.
Customer's always right,
Exactly. Even when they're the
quote
dumbest
unquote.
people you've ever come
Right.
across in your
Even
entire life.
even though when they're wrong. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh gosh, yeah. And so I find that I'm referencing the really bad experiences that I've had in work and in retail, as well as some of the good ones too. And I kind of look back and go, okay, why was it so good? Why
Right.
was that such a relief to me?
Well, I was going to ask about where you draw your inspiration. It sounds like you draw it a bit from the past or previous experiences. Do you have any? Do you draw it also from current experiences, or how does that work?
I do. I try every once in a while, without being creepy, going into like Starbucks and observing, lightly
Yeah.
observing. I don't people watch because as I'm a guy, and if a guy starts staring at people, then it's insanely creepy.
Right.
So I try to glance up, and I just every once in a while I'll glance up and I'll just monitor, or look around at the baristas and what they're doing, what their interactions are. There's a small Starbucks maybe 5 minutes from my house, um, here where I live, and sometimes I'll go in there and I'll just sit and I'll be working on things, but I'll just be aware of the people around me, the conversations, and I don't necessarily listen in, but I notice how people are talking to each other, and I notice how they're interacting, and I notice how either someone could be intensely studying to my right, and somebody's talking about when he like made his kid go into hockey because he was in love with the Mighty Ducks, you
Right.
know. And he's saying it so loud that everyone can hear it, and so you're not actually listening in because I think he's publicly like telling everyone in the store this, and so it's kind of like, but I watch all of that and I'm like, okay, this is really interesting. Why is it interesting? Can I use it?
Hmm.
It's not always on, but there are certain times where I go specifically to be aware of the atmosphere.
Do you ever eavesdrop?
Uh, not usually, not in those settings.
Yeah.
Unless I mean, there was one time this guy was talking about how he got his kid into hockey because of the Mighty Ducks, but like he was sitting right beside me, and he was talking on top of his lungs.
You couldn't help it.
Right, and at that point, sometimes I try to turn the music up, but it's just not working.
Sure.
Uh,
Well, I fully admit that as a writer, I eavesdrop, and if you're going to have a conversation next to me, I may use it for a story. One thing that I do like to do, and let me rephrase that again. I'm rephrasing a lot tonight. One thing that I will do is I'll put in my headphones and not turn anything on. And I'll go sit in a crowd of people.
Everyone has done this, yes.
Yeah, and I'll just sit there, and I get so much material that way. They think I'm listening to music. I'm listening to them talk.
Yeah.
And I mean, sure, it might be kind of mean eavesdropping, but at the same time, like,
it's great material.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're going to talk on your phone in public,
exactly.
I think that's free reign right there.
Yeah, and I think also getting to know the baristas themselves, for me, getting to know the people who work at some of these places, it's so cool because to me that's gold. It's gold to just talk to them about what, building the relationship with these people, and knowing kind of what they're doing and why they're working where they are. Well, this is my life now, and so this is why I have to do this. Right. And there was actually, speaking of listening in conversations, there was one conversation between a grandmother and her granddaughter that I really remember. They were talking very loud. This is another one of those things. But the grandmother was trying to get her granddaughter to leave the city and to go broaden her horizons. And it was such an odd reversal for this area because most of the older people really want to stay homebodies. They don't really want to go anywhere. They don't want to travel. But in this case, it was the opposite. The grandmother was really trying to encourage the granddaughter to go abroad and to go, broaden her horizons. And she was being borderline arrogant that she didn't want to move anywhere. She didn't want to go anywhere. She wanted to stay here the rest of her life. And I thought that was such an odd, within the culture, it was such an odd thing to happen. And and that's why I was like, well, okay, so take the idea of the old mother and the old grandmother and the young granddaughter and switch their attitudes. I'm like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, real life is great inspiration.
It is. It really is. I've overheard many an interesting things over my days, and also I used to smoke cigarettes. So whenever I would go out for cigarette breaks in public buildings, listening to people talk it's one of my favorite hobbies. It was one of my favorite hobbies. Like just the stories. One group of women were talking about how her husband thought that Phil Collins sounded like a child molester. Not was. Sounded like one.
How does that happen?
I don't know. I don't even know what a child molester sounds like.
That's so weird. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, that has to go in a story somewhere, But
yeah, I've had a few. I've definitely used some of the weirdest customers I've ever dealt with in Space Barista, and I have plans for them.
Yeah.
Because, oh my gosh, I've got so many weird stories.
Do you have recurring characters outside of the main one?
I do. Basically, the main character of Space Barista is this guy named Tomoakin, which is Tomo, just for short. Because when I wrote Tomoakin, I was like, no one's going to care about that name. And so I was like, just shorten it to Tomo. Right. And I was like, okay, Tomo, yeah, got it. And because it was just easier. I just knew it was easier to. I wouldn't care if it was Tomoakin. I'd be like, eh. But he's got his best friend named Charlie. And that's the weird thing about this universe is they're not orbiting Earth. He's in a space mall orbiting a planet, but it's not Earth. Earth doesn't exist in this universe.
Okay.
But they have different weird things going on in the universe. Like his best friend's name is Charlie. His love interest, who she doesn't necessarily return it yet, is Kira. Her name is Kira, and which I totally, was like, I have a specific character that I like in a specific franchise named Kira, and I'm like, this is great. I love this name. And then he has this neighbor named Jen, and Jen is actually from Earth, from another universe. She hops universes, and I just decided not to explain any of their powers. They're not mutants. They're not anything. They're just who they are, and they do what they do. So,
what was the reasoning behind not explaining that?
I just felt it had been done so much, both in my work and everybody else's work, that I'm going to say something I actually don't say very often, but I really think we're moving into a kind of a post-sci-fi. All of the tropes that we're so used to hearing are becoming old and used far too often. Like, an extrasolar ray hit so-and-so and turned him into Solar Man. No one's actually going to really remember that anymore. It was in the 1930s. It was fantastic. It was amazing. Science was new. Science was doing cool stuff. And so that was very interesting. But now it's just been played through so many times. I just decided at first not to say anything and just say, oh yeah, he controls coffee. That's what he does. Eventually, in one comic, when he went on a trip, he said, oh yeah, well, it has something to do with the fact that his species were dolphins a million years ago. They were space dolphins, and they intermarried with not countless species, and they picked up a few powers along the way. And because some of the species had superpowers, and that's kind of pretty much it. And his little dorsal fin on his forehead controls the coffee. That's where he gets his power from. And then Kira is basically a pretty soldier. Kind of lifted the idea from. It was more like a tribute to the idea of Sailor Moon. Of every planet having their own guardian, and so she's her own self-proclaimed. Kira is her own self-proclaimed guardian. She's not actually a guardian. She just kind of plays one on TV type of thing. Right. She's self-deluded in some way, and Jen is the most mysterious of all. I was thinking about her arc coming home. She is a human from Earth, from an alternate Earth, far dimensions, far away. And nothing about her makes sense. She was able to look into another dimension, and her face changed. Her entire appearance changed. And no one's actually asked her about it, but she just is kind of nonchalant, like, yeah, that happens. So she kind of pulled a little bit of a Doctor Who, and her face changed a little bit whenever something major happens to her. And so it's just kind of like these, and I wanted to create this atmosphere of everybody has their own quirk, but sometimes you just don't ask about it.
You just accept it.
You just accept it, yeah. And the idea is that these guys can be friends with their weirdness, with their individual weirdness. Each person having their own individual weirdness, without it being like, oh, you're dimensional girl, you're coffee controlling lad, you're teleporting Tommy, and they're just kind of normal people living, and to be honest, their powers are not that unusual compared to all the aliens around them. So they're just kind of like, compared to everybody else around them, they're just really nothing special.
Just the normal, yeah. Are you going to, over time, make any attempts with the story to explain them, or are you just going to say this is who they are, and then keep going with the next?
I think eventually I will explain it. I'll give them all different, little features.
Sure.
But I wanted the readers to get to know them first and become familiar with seeing them a lot and become familiar with, Charlie is a mechanic. Jen is weird.
Right.
Tomo is a space barista. Kira is a bread shop girl, and that's pretty much it. And I want to just kind of establish them as that being kind of what they do, because whenever we meet someone, we always kind of try to connect that person with something that they do. So hey, that's the dude who does movies. You know, that
Right.
guy draws for movies, or this guy does this, or this guy does that. This guy, you know, works in customer service. This guy works in IT. This guy, you know, we all have like these identifiers that people use to kind of connect with us. And I wanted to kind of do that first before we get to know them. You know, it's kind of like all of Space Priest is kind of a conversation. You know, you're kind of just there observing casual conversation in this unusual and kind of hopefully elegant universe.
Right.
You know, it's just so huge and so vast, and all of the galaxies communicate with each other, and you can go to the other side of the universe and all this, but but people have to live in it. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not just you know.
So if it's shifting then to this, you said post sci-fi. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
I like that. It's fun,
Maybe
by the way.
postmodern science fiction. That might be a better.
Would you? What about neo sci-fi?
That might work.
All right. I don't know. There's too many. I like to shorten words. The amount of
Sure.
words.
Yeah. Well, we could call it neo sci-fi. I mean, essentially, it's science fiction that no longer relies on the old tropes.
Okay.
The old tropes are understood.
Yeah. So what would you see? What's your preference to see then in the new direction? What would you like to see?
Much more of an emphasis on character. I think what made classic science fiction, the golden age of science fiction, so important and so palatable and so intense in some ways, like Asimov's Foundation series, anything by Ray Bradbury, you name it, all of the greats. There was something about it that connected with the human existence, that connected with our perception of the universe. The idea of Foundation, in that humans have to live in this ever-changing world and things are becoming so advanced, but we've lost so much. Even with our advancements, that what used to be mechanical is now religion. That's how distorted society has become. That it's confusing. It's confusing engineering with religion. There are priests over. And I'm sorry if anybody has not read the Foundation series. I'm going to do a little bit of a spoiler, but religion and science is now intermixing to where science has become religion in some ways, and there are priests of science, and or Ray Bradbury of having these stories of people discovering something and it rocking the way that they view existence.
Right.
So I think it's actually, well, I guess you could call it neo science fiction, but maybe it's more of a return to what science fiction was originally intended to be.
Okay.
Instead of just going around shooting lasers, we're now exploring our existence in the universe again.
So move away from the Michael Bay science fiction.
Yes, I think there's a place for the popcorn movies, and I think that's that's always going to be there. But I don't know if we should call that. I don't know if we should call that. I don't think we should equate that type of science fantasy, because I think that's more science fantasy, like
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Transformers and that kind. That's really science fantasy. Yeah, it's talking about techno-organic beings, but it's not really treating it as a hardcore existence-altering type of thing. It's
sure.
Because they I don't want to really go into that, but you can't necessarily equate that with. I think they're just different branches, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
Different branches on a tree. The Michael Bay branch is a good way to kill a Friday night or a Thursday night, or just watch a movie while you're doing something else. But then there's stuff like Interstellar, where if you don't pay attention, you're going to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to lose your place, and you're not going to understand what's happening. Or Gravity, where it's much more of the kind of sudden realization of how small we are, compared to the rest of the universe.
Right.
And I think that's maybe the best explanation I can think of.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. You were talking about mythology and religion here just a few minutes ago. Does that ever play into the science fiction stuff that you would like to see more of?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm actually most of what I do when I write is try to incorporate some aspect of how do I put this? I try to incorporate some aspect of religion or a religious thought or a religious something. Because I always lose followers on Twitter whenever I say this, but I have no problem with discussing religion. I don't have any point to prove when it comes to religion.
Do you have a specific denomination?
I'm actually non-denominational.
Okay. Okay. You just like discussing religion.
Yeah, I talk about it with friends, and we can have these. I talk with friends who are Hindu, atheist, Buddhist. I actually had a conversation with a friend who was Buddhist a few days ago. And I love the fact that we can find the common points, common points of in what we believe, type of thing, and I think that's a good thing to do. But I like the idea. I do a lot of historical research, and it's fascinating to me that people's lives really did revolve, whether or not revisionists want to actually say this, especially in the ancient times. Daily life religion was a part of daily life, because before it was organized, it was animist and it was spiritualist, and so they didn't have necessarily deities that they prayed to, but they believed there were spirits in everything. There was a spirit in that log you just tripped over, right. So maybe that spirit wasn't happy with you, and in the idea of like warring states, like whose god is going to win. You have two civilizations on each side of the river, and one side has, the, tree god, and the other side has a rock god, and they all fight, and whoever wins, their god is going to be the god that is worshipped, and then it kind of goes on from there, and so I just find it fascinating. I find it, I do a lot of ancient Middle Eastern research on the old Assyrian, Babylonian beliefs, the ancient, not necessarily what is being taught now, but the ancient Jewish beliefs, the way that they viewed and it's not just the beliefs, it's how they viewed the world, because the Babylonians believed the earth was flat, and everything they viewed in science and anything else was viewed from that perspective. And I think you can't necessarily represent a culture accurately whenever you're world building if you don't incorporate some sort of metaphysical belief. It doesn't, and I think some people miss the point that you don't have to believe it. Right. You can create a culture that believes in the giant red donut, and that doesn't mean you yourself have to believe in the giant red donut. It's just like this almost literalist thing that comes over some people that they can't handle it.
I think it's a concern that your dog is going to poop in my lawn. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are people that push the religion, and I think people have become almost a bit they have almost too much of a knee-jerk reaction to it now.
Yeah.
Where it's, I understand wanting to say, hey, I don't want to talk about that, or I have my own thing, don't try to push that on me, but it's, right. It's another to say, okay, well, sure, let's have a discussion, as long as you're not trying to convince me.
Right. So. Well, and mostly whenever I talk about, religion on Twitter, it's usually in terms of world building. I don't necessarily just generally discuss. I actually, aside from world building, I don't tend to generally discuss, unless it's with my friends and we could talk. We can just be, just share different points and that kind of stuff. I'm okay with that. But
that doesn't happen on Twitter.
No, gosh, no. And so I try, with Twitter, I really try to stay away from general talk about religion, period. Whenever I do mention religion, it's within the context of world building, and talking about historical context of religion, whatever religion, versus what you're trying to write. And I always encourage people. I was like, don't run away from religion in writing. There's some interesting stuff. I mean, you look at history, and some really interesting things were done. Some great achievements and some really bad stuff too. Right. Under the same banner. And so it's really a good. I think one of the only science fiction TV shows that really handled religion well, fictional religion, was Deep Space Nine, because they dealt with the idea of the Bajoran. Like everybody who was in Starfleet knew they were aliens, knew these gods were aliens. Like it was classifiable, quantifiable. They knew what it was, but that didn't deter the people's belief that they were still gods. and so like it was like they kind of had to deal with this very sensitive issue throughout the entire series. That they knew scientifically that they were not gods,
Right.
but they had to respect other people who believe differently, and that to me is one of the most mature handlings of religion in pop culture, I think, so far, in terms of science fiction.
Okay.
So
Have
otherwise,
you ever...
everybody runs from it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I hate this cliche, but it's a hot button
Oh
topic.
yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's so polarizing.
Yeah.
So
That's why I don't talk about it generally with people.
yeah.
It's always in the context of world building, because all of a sudden, because I actually shut down and I stop talking when people say, "Well, what are your religious beliefs?" And I'm like, "Nope, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not discussing that on Twitter."
You and I
You
don't
don't
know each other
know.
that well.
Yeah, I'm like, for all you know, I could worship Barney the dinosaur, but
Right.
it's like that we're not discussing my personal beliefs here. And I think that's where some people miss it, is that I'm not discussing my personal beliefs necessarily. I'm discussing an approach to religion within fictional context.
Do you do you implement some of the religions into your comics, and if so, do people kind of come back at you and say you're wrong?
I try to be as general as possible. With previous thing that I did, a previous comic called Mayan, which I'm working on getting it out in print form. And it's basically about this guy who is this. I based some of the characters on ancient Jewish belief systems, um, but I made them trans-dimensional beings. And I did get some flack for that. Some person told me that I was being very disrespectful in doing that. I'm like, well, I'm not portraying these characters as they were portrayed. I had to be very careful because I put the guy in. He's Middle Eastern. I made him kind of dark skinned, and I gave him kind of a Babylonian look. I patterned him after some of the Babylonian reliefs,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, I knew what I was getting into when I did that. So, and I took some of the creatures from the Jewish book of Ezekiel that had 4 heads and 4 wings, and that whole thing. And one person just straight up told me that I was wrong and that I needed to not do that, and that I was disrespectful. And I'm like, I appreciate your beliefs, but I need to to do what I feel like I need to do. And I didn't believe it was disrespectful, to do that personally. But I weaved it in with the context that these are all trans-dimensional beings, and that's just how they show up in this universe. They're actually.
I was going to ask how you handled the people that would come back at you with that, and not specifically trolls, because that's a completely different group of people to handle. But which we can totally talk about as well. But I mean, how do you handle these situations? Do you just say, "Thank you for your opinion, I respect it, but this is how I'm going to do it," or is there ever a time where you've actually made a change?
Someone once said take every bit of criticism seriously, and I do, because sometimes I will just miss things, or sometimes I won't realize that something can come across as disrespectful, and I really try to handle everything with kid gloves. I really do, but I'm such I'm such a student of history, that to me, using these creatures that appeared they were fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating creatures. You don't have. It's just the way that they appeared, in the book, the way they were described. I was like, man, that's a trans-dimensional creature. That sounds, and then the whole point was that they were all going to meet up. This guy who was this, nearly limitless being that walked he was called a galaxy walker, and he was just a higher form of intelligence. He was just a higher being with more dimensions. Since we have 4, he had like 8. And he was just so things that were impossible for us. He just had more dimensions, and so I just kind of mixed a lot of ideas in quantum physics with the storytelling. So I basically took quantum physics and I took some ancient mythology, and I was like, let's explain this. So let's talk about this. But I really tried to keep it on the science fiction standpoint. I really did not go into religion. I also brought in the bad guys, which were the old Jewish creatures called the Nephilim, which were half angel, half human. And I was like, oh, it'd be really interesting if there were like genetic experiments of like higher beings. And so I did that, and so people were a little trepidatious about that, but I didn't negate anything by creating these creatures. I didn't say anything did or did not exist. I just patterned the design after that stuff, and so.
And you can't be too like I don't want to say derogatory, but I mean, how derogatory can you be with that?
In terms of creating creatures out of mythology, or
yeah.
I think the way that I approach it is that if I'm going to create something out of mythology, or if I'm going to create something, or any kind of spiritual being that is widely understood and recognized, I need to treat it with respect. I need to treat the creature with respect. I need to treat all of the designs with respect. I need to not. I just need to be careful.
Yeah.
I need to be very careful. And that's why Space Priest is a lot easier for me, because I'm not doing anything like that. So, but Mayim was specifically this sort of quantum physics, ancient mythology story, and I did a lot of research on it. And I really tried to not. I even approached it to the point of where if some ancient Mesopotamian was reading it, they would probably not get offended. So, like, right. That kind of thing. But I can't control people, and I can't control if people are offended with just even the appearance. Because with one person, I mean, they were very respectful when they said they didn't believe that it was something that should appear. They were very respectful, and I was respectful with them. But and I took that seriously, and I was like, okay, well, is this going to affect people? And I asked a few of my friends that are very honest with me, and they said, no, you need to do what you want. I was like, that's what you wanted to do, you need to go ahead and do it. Just be careful. You know?
Right.
And there have been some times that I've wanted to tell stories that my friends have said, don't you dare. You are going to face so much backlash for telling this story that you will regret it forever.
And you don't seem like the kind of person that likes to stir up waters with those kinds of things.
No, and that's why when I approached the idea of using all of this ancient because a lot of it's ancient Middle Eastern stuff. All of the ideas of the Nephilim and the cherubim and the other, all coming from the ancient Hebrew text. I wanted to be very careful. I didn't want to, I wanted to just approach it and be able to tell the story I wanted to tell without making people want to torch me.
Is there ever a time where you do want to tell a story knowing that it could create some trouble, but you have to do it as an artist anyway?
Yes, and I am going to. And well, I'm working on this series called Last Anomaly, and it is about this guy who wakes up in a concentration camp in the future. This universe, all superheroes are incarcerated and killed. This is way beyond any issue of superhero registration or anything like that. It is just
long past that.
It's long past that. Humanity is just simply trying to survive by extinguishing everybody who is just even slightly genetically different. I mean, we're talking massive, like, even people with genetic diseases are being killed type of thing. It's like that. It's become that extreme.
Wow.
And the good thing about starting with a new dimension is that you don't have to make it seem like our current reality. You can do what you want with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I'm going to there are several things that I'm going to approach in Last Anomaly. It's going to be an adult. It's 15 plus. Space Priest is for all ages, but Last Anomaly is 15. It's for adults basically. And I don't necessarily believe I'm going to be graphic with some of the images, but it's going to deal with a lot of very adult issues like capital punishment. How does a civilization handle itself? Where does religion come in? If you have a small colony of people, if a bunch of people from our modern times, like right off the street, were put into a colony, how would they survive? Because you can't just imprison someone for the rest of their life if they're a danger to everybody into a small group. And so it's kind of like exploring the idea of how people who consider themselves to be civilized would react if they're put into a really, kind of live or die situation. and so it's going to deal with a lot of stuff, and there are several things. I've been seeing a lot of very intense debate about comics recently, and portrayals and representations, and it's actually made me stop and really reconsider doing any of this with Last Anomaly, because I don't know if I want the backlash and the accusations, and
there's something to be said about creating a ripple, but you don't want to make a giant splash for a bad reason. I think that
exactly.
I mean, if you were already established as an artist, and you might be able to get away with something like that, But if you're just building if you're just building and creating your own voice, that might not be the one thing you want to be known for. To start.
And in fact, it's a really bad idea. If I heard someone else trying to do some of the stuff I'm wanting to do right now, I'd be like, wait. Just wait. So I'm actually trying to. What I'm probably going to do is tell a light version of some of the stories I wanted to tell, and because there's just stuff I'm just trying to determine what is and is not appropriate in the current atmosphere of comics, because history has never been comfortable. It's never been clean. It's never been politically correct. As much as we love to claim that it is, it really has never been. And I think with some people they get very upset because it kind of is an antithesis towards their goal.
Right.
So to recognize the antithesis is to take away from the goal, and that's not how I was raised in school. I was raised that you understand the past so you don't repeat the problems, don't repeat the mistakes.
Yeah, I think the key words though were some people. And I think I don't think it's possible, and I'm not saying they should be disregarded, but I don't think you're going to please every single person. There's always going to be, whether it's one person or a small contingency of people, there's always going to be some people that have a problem with something, and I wonder where that line is where you say, I need to pay attention to what they're saying, or if you say, look, I just can't please everybody.
Yeah. I think right now for me, where I am with Last Anomaly, I have the end of the story. I have a lot of ideas that I really want to, in the structure that I really want to tell. But I think there are probably ways to hint at things without actually having to portray them.
Okay.
Which I think the big issue lately has been the portrayal of things instead of the. Now, some people are so extreme that they don't want you to even mention things, which I believe is. I think that kind of comes down to censorship. But yeah, I think again, it's like dealing with ancient creatures. Mentioned in the Hebrew text, it's like, I know I'm going to get some backlash, but it's got to be worth it. Whatever story I tell, I always basically judge it of, is this going to be worth the backlash that I'm going to have in saying it? Because in college, once I went into art, I went into went to graphic design, but we also had to take art class, like general fine arts classes, and they always told us, they said, it doesn't matter who hates you, if your message is important, you need to get it out. And so I'm kind of like, I'm going between that and also like, well, this is also kind of a semi-professional thing.
Right.
So, money, and the fact that I may not be able to make more issues of this if things get, too bad, and, be making the issues for nobody. So, it's kind of like it's the issue I think that every artist has. It's like, well, they're really going to hate me and try to throw me in jail, or because basically all of the characters in Last Anomaly are going to be abused in some way. And they're all going to go through really hard choices and really hard things, and so I just have to be careful in the way that I present the information.
It's not easy. It's not easy, but that's the joy of it, I think. At least that's what I get out of it. I love the fact that telling a story is not easy. Telling a good story is not easy.
Yeah, and it's been almost a year now since the first Last Anomaly premiered, because I kind of stopped myself and was like, okay, I really need to think about this story before I let it go. Right. Space Priest, I have no problem. He's just a dude who sells coffee. There will never be. He will not die. and there will never be any major controversy. There's never going to be that special episode where they deal with drugs, like in Space Force.
like the more you should know kind of a thing. Like there's never going to be one of those.
And that will never happen. We're not even going to go that far. There's going to be a dude who goes out and sells coffee and just that kind of thing. And so so I kind of like that though, because Space Priest is so light and happy and kind of quirky and zany, and I can kind of focus on Last Anomaly over here, where it deals with a bunch of not necessarily dark but intense subjects, and I don't have to look at that all the time. I don't have to look at it 24/7.
Sure.
Because I'm not that. That's not my temperament. So it's like I need a decompression.
Are any of these are both web comics? Yes.
Space Priest is Last Anomaly is actually available on Comixology.
Oh, cool.
So I'm almost finished with this. I'm writing issue number 3.
Okay.
So I'm just being careful with. I'm definitely taking a more classic science fiction approach than I was last year. So it's gonna be Last Anomaly is gonna be much more of a classic sci-fi feel. I guess it's gonna have more of a classic sci-fi feel.
Okay.
In terms of Asimov type of stuff, like civilization building and that kind of thing. And so because right now the guy who the guy wakes up in a concentration camp, goes into this other dimension, and to absorb other people's powers. It's to copy them. And he goes into this universe, his power activates, and he absorbs the light or the energy from this universe, which gives him a near unlimited power. And there's a creature there who's like, yeah, this is kind of our home. You've kind of tripped into it. You can go do whatever you want now. He doesn't care about what this guy does. And he's like, you can come hang out with us. We can teach you how things work, or you can go anywhere. And he's like, I'm going to go save my people, basically. And that's the end of the first issue. Is him returning back, and he actually goes back to Earth, and Earth is a desolate wasteland. So however long he's been gone, something has happened to Earth to destroy it, and so he's just concerned that he's got to get his other anomalies. So he's going to go back in time and get the other anomalies before the first issue. So I'm trying in terms of stuff, because I made a lot of propaganda images based on old propaganda that I found, like old propaganda posters and stuff like that. And some of it's so intense I will not show it, because I realized when I got finished with it that it's going to cause me problems.
Yeah.
So, like World War II propaganda is probably a little more civil rights stuff. So,
okay.
But I also had to be aware of the fact that I'm not, I'm a white guy who's writing about
the South,
the rights of Louisiana, but yeah, and I'm I have to be careful, because I'm aware of how I will be perceived if I approach things in a certain way. So.
Well, the artist in me wants to say screw other people, but the responsible writer in me wants to say I think you're doing the right thing by taking it very seriously. So
yeah, and there was actually a story that I wanted to tell, and I ran it by one of my friends, and that was the story, and it was about a relationship, a very specific type of relationship with a very specific type of person, and I said I really want to just tell the story, and she said, if you do, you will never hear the end of it, because you are nothing like this person. And you can be a good storyteller, but it doesn't matter. The perceptions of the people will not allow you to tell that story.
Yeah.
And she was right. That was the best bit of advice, and I shelved it. And I'm probably never going to use it, at least not yet. And she's like, society's just not ready for it.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay. She's like, and if they are, they're probably not going to, they may not accept it from you because of who you are. So.
Yeah. It's good to have idea editors like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so and she didn't invalidate the idea, and I think that's the great thing about getting friends who will not invalidate your ideas, but let you know the consequences of those ideas.
So you have those friends now. Did you have those growing up?
No. The longest time I was kind of on my own. It was kind of the process. Like it all started in 2011 when I started meeting other artists online and started hanging out with them, and taking a few classes and getting in with some groups of people, and kind of, connected with a few other artists, and we kind of formed this relationship where we just bounce ideas off of each other.
Oh, cool.
And story ideas and something like that. I have a friend, Andrew Grieve, who does the Team Striker comic, and we're really good friends. And we'll be on Skype just drawing together. Just won't be saying anything. We'll just be drawing and just talking as we do it. And he's the kind of guy where I can go and say, I want to do this with Space Barista, and he's like, that's a very bad idea. He's like, you know it's going to happen when you do this, because I wanted to make like a quick 90-degree turn with Space Barista's story, and he's like, no, don't. He's like, you really don't need to do that because people are just getting used to your characters, and if you do this, you're going to make them angry. And at first I was like, no, you're wrong. You're completely wrong. And then after 2 days, I came back and I was like, yeah, you're right.
You're right.
You're right.
I'll listen to you next time.
Yeah. And so we're both very, very honest with each other. And we're good enough friends that we can do that. But we're as honest as we are with each other because we care about each other and we're invested in each other's work. Yeah. We want to see it do well, and we don't want it to die. And I think it's finding those people who can get invested in your work, and that you can invest in their work to where, of course they're going to get all the credit for it, but, it doesn't matter. Because once you hit that relationship point, once you hit that point in the relationship where you both really care about each other, then you're actually really excited to see them do well, and you want them to do well. And it's kind of, I think it's been described as a circle of trust. Mm-hmm. It's like you have all the people that you share information with, but then you have those few people that you really trust and that you can really say, okay, I'm going to bare my soul here, and this is the story that I want to tell, and this is the message that I want to say, and you can trust them to not shoot it down. You can trust them to not hurt you. That trust is built between everyone, and it takes time to build that. It's not an overnight thing. For me, so far with my circle of trust, it's been 5 or 6 years in building that, and it changes. Sometimes people come into your circle of trust and then they leave. Sometimes you have to kick them out. Sometimes they kick you out.
You lose trust in those people, yes.
Yeah, and it everything about relationships is organic, and it just it's looking for those people that you can trust.
Yeah. So that's actually a good place to sort of wrap up. I like that. That's good, because we're all about community as well. I especially here making comics worldwide in the underdog community. There's something very powerful about when artists get together, and it's almost like there's a certain wavelength everybody gets on, and it's great for that support and inspiration. So it's cool that you found that.
Yeah, and I think in general, the webcomic community and the comic community is really supportive. They're really supportive of each other,
especially online. The online, it's crazy close and tight knit, and they're welcoming too.
Yeah, some of the greatest people that I've met have been mainstream. I know a few people who work in mainstream, but they'll talk to anybody. It's not anything special with me. It's that they'll follow anyone and they will talk to anyone. They will carry conversations, with anybody who talks to them. Mm-hmm. And it's not there's no specific this person is better than anybody else because they only talk this artist only talks to them. They'll talk to everyone. There are a few, I can't remember their names offhand, but there are a few that I talk to regularly, and they're just normal people. Yeah. They will just talk to you about anything, and those are the people you want to be near. The people who are not elitist, the people who are down to earth and are on Twitter all the time and talking about random things like the best beer that they like, or the best food that they like, or they need a cheeseburger. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they can prove that they also have a life too outside of art, and that makes them more well-rounded and more interesting.
Yeah, and I think it also calms down this idea of the starstruck idea of this is all they get up in the morning. They have a pencil in their hand, and as they're combing their hair, they're drawing pictures of Spider-Man, or something. And it's just they're regular people with families and friends, and they get up in the morning and they groggily stumble into the bathroom to comb their hair, and they're out the door half asleep. They're just like the rest of us. They just.
Could you imagine some of these artists they get out of the shower and they just draw a comic panel in like the mist on the mirror, and they're just it's like no, 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 make a little panel.
That would be magical.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You can probably set up something for that too. If like a little like digital something.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think if anything, social media has taken away the stigma of the comic artist.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, that person, because I remember growing up, Jim Lee was like this mythical creature that was high atop the mountains of Marvel Comics, creating the X-Men comics that I loved, and I follow his social media accounts, and he's just a normal dude.
Right.
He's just like, yeah, totally went here and had a great time, and oh my gosh, do you know who I met? And he's completely starstruck too, and I'm just like, this. It's just so encouraging to know that these are normal people.
Mm-hmm.
Just regular guys who get up, guys and girls who get up and they just go to work and they do what they love.
They do what they love, and that's what makes they do what they love. That's important. So, all right. So let's kind of summarize on some of the current projects you have going on, and we've talked a lot today about some things you're working on. So what are some of the current things you have going and available for people to check out?
Okay. Currently, I have Space Barista, which is spacebarista.com. I post definitely once a week, sometimes twice a week, and that's the only webcomic project that I have going really right now.
Okay.
Now the printed comics that I'm working on have Last Anomaly, which is already available at Comixology and on Gumroad, and I am working on a few other titles. Not really ready to talk about them yet, but I'm going to try and get maybe one other title out this year. We'll see how it goes.
Right.
But Last Anomaly is starting to pick up, so that it's starting to get better traffic and more sales, and so I'm going to try and focus on that for a little bit. And I'm also working on going to Wizard World Tulsa this fall in October, and so I'm going to try and have stuff there by the time I go.
Do you do a lot of conventions? Have you ever been to others?
Conventions around here have been somewhat sparse. I've been to a few conventions here. But Wizard World has really been like the latest thing that has kind of taken the city by storm. And then today, I think this year, a new convention not connected to Wizard World has already opened up. So that's happening in March, but I won't be able to make that one. But Wizard World is definitely kind of the big thing around here. So I'm going to start going to that, every year that I possibly can. And I'm also planning on going to Denver Comic Con next year to table.
Awesome.
Over there too.
You're kind of in a weird area.
It's a very weird area.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say for many reasons, but as far as comics.
Well, no, you would be correct. You would be so correct.
I just don't want to, prevent our listeners from that area down. Anyway,
Tulsa. I'll say this: Tulsa's great. The rest of Oklahoma, don't stop.
I've driven through. Yeah, I've driven through it. I've driven through a majority of the states in the U.S. and I know where the weird ones are. So I'll just leave it. I'll leave it at that. But you're kind of in a spot where it's like you're in that middle. It's like the middle of the Venn diagram, and there's just you're just like there's nothing. You got to go far.
There's nothing in a few hours drive. Yeah.
Right.
I can go to Dallas Comic Con, which is about 5 hours away. I can go to, Dallas is about 5 hours away. Denver's 12 hours away.
Jeez.
I can go to Kansas City, but I don't want to go to Kansas City.
Been there too.
There's nothing wrong with Kansas City. I've got family and friends there, but still.
The Kansas City, Kansas side.
Yes.
Nice.
But it's it's kind of like that's pretty much it. I mean, I have to take a flight anywhere else, and I'm probably going to take a flight to Denver.
Okay.
So it's an odd part of the United States. That's part of the reason why I haven't really gone to a lot of conventions. It's just it's a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to go and do that kind of thing. So I may go to Wizard World New Orleans next year. I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. And not to reopen a further conversation, but would you ever consider moving to an area where you're closer to those sorts of things? Or do you think where you're at is fine?
I would love to have more accessibility to those areas.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily by location, but For instance, I have my friend Andrew. I'm looking at Calgary, the Calgary Expo up there.
Yeah.
Mostly because I can fly up there and I have a place to stay.
There you
If I
go.
go, or I have friends in the area, or if I go to Emerald City Comic Con, I have friends all over Seattle, and so I have either places to stay or friends who will show me around the city, and so
Well,
I
now you
think
have
and even New York Comic Con. So.
and now you have
Go
friends
ahead.
in Southern California. So if you ever want to go to Comic Con or WonderCon or any of the
Yes.
other, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I would love that. And so I think, the last few years it's just been me kind of figuring out what I want to do with
Hmm.
with comic titles. And now that I'm kind of there-ish, now I want to start doing conventions and kind of spread the word of what I'm doing.
Do you mind if I ask how
Um,
old you are?
31.
31. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which in the South, as you know, is far over the hill because
You're
it's
middle
10 years
aged.
older than 21.
Yeah.
Yes. According to the South. Well, a lot of my friends in Louisiana married when they were 18, and so I mean they're well on their way to being grandparents right now. And
Wow,
so
that's
I
crazy.
did
That's
not. I went
crazy.
to college, so
Yeah.
went to college and had an education, and started getting a career, and been focusing on that. So when I moved up here, everyone gets married in their 30s and 40s,
Yeah.
so it's okay.
Okay.
But down there, I mean, on Facebook, I see their babies are having babies, and they're starting to look. They're like, "Oh, I'm just getting middle aged." And I'm like, "You are 28
You're
years old.
20.
You are not."
uh,
I was like, "Stop it right now." Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a weird dichotomy because the southern, the Louisiana culture that I grew up with is kind of chiming in my ear, going, "You're so old. You're so
is
old."
it?
But then everybody else is like, "You're so young. You're
Yeah.
only 31 years old. You
Yeah.
have your whole life ahead of you." I'm like, I don't know which way to believe. And so it's like, it's such an ingrained idea
believe.
that anybody over 21 is over the hill.
Yeah. Believe the latter in
That's
that
what I
one.
need.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yes.
it's. I turned 40 in 3 months, and
Mhm.
I I feel 70, but I know that I'm I actually am middle aged at this point. Like that. 40 is middle aged. There's no getting
Yeah.
around it. But I still know that I have a long way to go. Like
Yeah.
there's so.
And I think that changed with the baby boomer generation.
Yeah.
And just real quick, the idea when I was growing up, all of the elderly people that I saw were like, oh, I just retired and I'm just gonna grow old and knit things in my house
Hmm.
and just wait to die. But now with the baby boomers kind of doing what they're doing, people aren't retiring until they're 70.
Right.
They're still working. They're still living and pursuing their dreams. They're still building things. Stan Lee is still doing what he's doing at whatever age he is now, like 80 something,
10 days older
90
than
something.
water. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, he's still pursuing everything that he loves. All of these
Mhm.
creatives are still doing what they love, and so it's kind of like our generations are now seeing the end of this bizarre kind of linear boxing up of people. Like
Right.
once you hit 30, you need to do this because in the past, once you were 30, because of the economy, you will have already paid off your student loans of like $2,000,
Hmm.
and you have a house and a car, two cars
Couple
with one or
kids.
two kids,
Yeah.
yeah, and a dog, and everything's great. But everything has so radically
That's.
changed in our economy and
Yeah.
in everything that, there are kids in their mid 20s still living with their parents,
Yep.
because they can't afford to move out on their own because of the mortgage bubble and all that, just everything that's happening.
The world
And
is
so
happening. Yeah.
the world is happening, yeah. And so now there are really no age limits on, and especially with art, there's no set limit on what you need to accomplish and when. There are no set milestones because some of the greatest people, some of the people actually got their start when they were 60.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
that's a long ways off. That's a
Well,
lot of years of working. And
yeah. My mother she's baby boomer. She was born in late 40s. So,
Mhm.
she grew up in that time, and that mentality of work, save money, retire, enjoy life is that we've seen what that does to people, and that doesn't sound like
Yeah.
fun anymore. And I say we as far as the generations now after the baby boomers,
Mhm.
because I don't want to work hard and then at 60, 65 look back and go, wait, now I can enjoy my life. Why couldn't I enjoy it before? And I think I read a study by these different home healthcare nurses and doctors, and one of the biggest regrets they kept hearing from men who were on their deathbed was that they spent too much time working and not enough time enjoying their life. And that mentality, I think, is shifting now. And somebody asked me, they're like, somebody older, they said, "What's your retirement like? Have you set up for that?" And I'm like, I don't want to retire. When I'm 65, I hope I'm still doing something that I love,
Right.
and I want to
Right.
do it until I'm dead.
Right. You have to pry your hands off the keyboard.
Seriously,
That's what they did with Einstein. Einstein literally kept doing what he loved until he died, and they had to take it out of his hands.
yeah. Well, I mean, look at Betty
Yeah.
White. She is
Oh,
literally older than sliced bread.
yes. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Yeah, and she's doing well. Hayao Miyazaki,
Hmm.
one of the greatest men in animation history. He's he's 70 something, and
Yeah.
he's still making stuff. He said, "I'm going to work until I die."
Yeah.
Because I just don't think it's bred within any creative of any spectrum. I don't think it's bred into any of us, and it's not a part of our DNA to give up at 60 and say, "Okay, I'm done." You know,
Yeah.
I can
I can
never
stop now.
imagine that day happening. Yeah, it's like, "Oh, okay, I'm good. I'm gonna go watch some Jeopardy and some Wheel of Fortune and
And
wait to die." And
be in bed by 8. Ugh.
exactly. And one thing recently that someone said that really stuck with me that I really want to do is that I never, at the end of my life, I don't want to have a regret that I didn't push as hard as I could push. I would have mistakes, that there would be, things, missed opportunities or something like that, but it wouldn't be because I didn't give everything I could.
Right.
I didn't just go for it, and I didn't just, because I don't want to be, 70 or 80 and go, man, I really should have taken that risk. I really should have
Hmm.
taken that opportunity when I had the chance. And,
I did a lot of dumb things growing up. A lot of dumb things. But I got a lot
well,
of
I think we all
experiences.
did.
Yeah, right. I mean, but we got a lot of experience and story out of that,
Yeah.
and if you can make it through that and you're not really negatively affecting people or society, and you can make it through that, it's okay to do dumb things.
Yeah.
It,
We've
it,
all done them.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and I can't remember where I was going with that, but I just I don't know.
Well, mistakes versus regret. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
we I think we all. I mean, every single human on this planet is going to have mistakes. We're all going to have things that we were like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But I don't want to be at the end and go, I really should have pursued that harder.
yeah. Right,
I really
right.
should have not. I should have knocked on that door when I had the chance.
I think on my tombstone I wanted to say at least he tried.
Well, that's not good. You're like, you tried and succeeded.
I
You
tried.
tried and
I tried.
succeeded.
Oh, that's okay. I'll amend that then. I'll make sure that
There you
says he tried and eventually succeeded.
Yeah.
But at least
There you go.
anyway.
Well, and
All right.
I've been
Well,
doing a lot of research. Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. You were doing research.
Well, I was doing research on people like Elon Musk and
Mm,
major billionaires, and none of them were. It was not easy for any of them to start with. There are a few wonderkins out there,
right.
but Richard Branson, series of failed things in his life. Elon Musk, listening to his interviews, series of failed things where he almost gave up. All of them. I mean, some of their defeats were so devastating that it nearly just killed them.
Well, and
in
you
some
see that in this in SpaceX. When they recently, a couple months ago, they shot up that rocket and tried to land it on that platform, and it didn't work. And he's like, "All right, it failed, but it was successful in its failure." And because they got something out of it. And
Yeah, they figured out what happened.
right.
And yeah, I mean, that's how he's always been, because I mean, when he started PayPal, he had one failure after another. People didn't want it, they hated him, they told him it was going to fail, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden it succeeded. And they're like, oh, he's a genius billionaire, he
Right,
walks
right.
on clouds.
Right,
It's
right.
just, you got to cut through the marketing hype around these people and get to the core of why they're successful, and that Richard Branson, I mean, my gosh, he has a series of failures, and now he's a multi-billionaire. He can do whatever he wants. Literally, whatever that man wants to do, he can do it.
Yep.
He has the ability, but really, the common thread with all of them is they just didn't give up.
Yeah.
Regardless of how much defeat was in front of them. So,
just keep trying. You gotta keep trying.
All right, and it's one of my mottos. Yeah.
Keep fighting.
Fight to your fist. Fight to your fist bleed. It's out of a sixpence. Another Richard song is an old one, but it just stuck with me, and I'm like, yeah, fight to your fist bleed. Like, keep fighting. Anyway. Yeah.
Got to do it. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So where can people find you online, social media stuff?
Social media. Twitter. I'm on Twitter. It's Mike. Mike the DAMBOLDT. It's my last name. My last name is unpronounceable with most people. It's damn bold, but it's long story.
Does it have does it actually have the T at the end, but it's just not pronounced?
It does have the T.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Currently it's not pronounced. So I have that. Then I have spacebarista.com. And I have a website, a comic website, which actually you and I are working on the podcast for, which is called Cambria Comics, and it's like the Cambrian Age, but without the N. So it's CambriaComics.com, and that's actually going to be like the kind of hub for all of my projects.
Oh, cool.
So if you don't remember anything else, CambriaComics.com has links to everything I do, and that's probably the easiest way to remember that. So just think the Cambrian Age, and then comics.
And then comics. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good way of doing it. Is just to have one hub that everybody can pick from.
Yeah, that's all the links to all the things. So
awesome. Well, Michael, thank you very much for sitting down and doing this. I'm glad we got to do it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was great.
Awesome.